All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to Take Charge for November of 2017. So tonight we're going to be talking about the management, or one of the ways that we can manage something called heart failure. So heart failure, a bit of an ominous sounding term. This is a cardiac condition where the heart, for one of a variety of reasons, has become weak. It's gotten weak and it has a hard time supplying all of the body with the oxygen-rich blood that it needs. As you can imagine, if parts of your body are not getting all the oxygen-rich blood that it needs, they're going to complain. You're going to be tired. You're going to have a hard time doing various activities. You're going to be sluggish. It's not a very fun condition to have. And unfortunately, more and more people are developing heart failure. Part of that is because medicine is getting really good at saving people who've had heart attacks. So it's a complex disorder, and as I said, there's a number of different ways that we can manage it. Well, today we're going to hear one of those ways, and that's something that's called left ventricular assist device. We're very fortunate to have with us today Marnie Rogers. Marnie is a nurse practitioner who works at Toronto General Hospital in the ventricular assist device clinic. So she's going to start the evening off by telling us a little bit about VADs, how they work, and all that kind of good stuff. And then after Marnie has spoken with us, we're going to listen to our very own Jim Hamilton, who's one of our graduates. And Jim has actually been living with a left ventricular assist device for about 4.5 years now. So he's going to share his experiences with that. So Marnie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So Rob didn't tell me I was going to be videotaped. I wouldn't have walked the 3 blocks from the bus stop with the wind blowing if I had known. But anyhow, I'm happy to see you all come tonight, and to thank Rob for inviting me. So how many of you heard of a mechanical heart? I'm going to tell you that we don't do mechanical hearts at Toronto General. Okay, we're not replacing the heart. We do mechanical heart pumps. So it's a little bit of a different term, okay? So the patient's own heart will remain with the patient. We're just putting in these little mechanical heart pumps to help the blood flow. So as Rob was mentioning, who are we putting these pumps in? Well, patients who have heart failure. So let's talk a little bit about heart failure. We know that heart failure affects about 500,000 Canadians, and there are 50,000 new patients diagnosed with heart failure every year. And when you're diagnosed with heart failure, your mean survival for men is 1.7 years, and your mean survival if you're a woman is only 3.2 years. What is the most common causes of heart failure? Well, as Rob mentioned, nearly 70% is because of coronary artery disease. So someone's had a heart attack and now they have scar tissue in their heart muscle, and scar tissue doesn't contract very well, so the heart is very weak and doesn't pump the blood very well. Another cause of heart failure is persistent high blood pressure. Hypertension for long term causes the heart muscle to become weak. And then lastly, if you have any heart valve problems. So this could mean a leaky heart valve, or a valve that has become calcified and is very stiff and not allowing the blood to pass through the heart easily. So those are the 3 most common causes of heart failure. Now, what are some of the symptoms that you may have if you've developed heart failure? Well, as Rob mentioned, when the heart isn't pumping enough oxygenated blood to all your organs and your muscles, you're going to be fatigued. So even just getting up and having a shower is going to be the only activity you're going to be able to accomplish that whole day because of fatigue. Okay? And when your heart doesn't pump the blood forward out to your body, it starts backing up into your lungs. And this is when we get fluid in the lungs that you may have heard about. And if you have fluid in the lungs, you're going to be short of breath. And then if the fluid backs up enough, it's going to back up into your legs. You're going to end up with really swollen ankles and legs. You may have seen people like this. So is there a treatment for heart failure? Well, there's no cure for heart failure, but it can be managed medically with medications that have been shown to make people with heart failure live longer and actually feel better. Unfortunately, patients with severe heart failure, medications won't be sufficient, and then the only treatment option for these patients is a heart transplant. Now, when we think about heart transplants in Canada, any sort of organs in Canada, we all are aware that there is an organ donor shortage. So you can be waiting for a heart on the transplant list, and unfortunately, you may wait up to 2 years to get a heart transplant. So some patients with severe heart failure don't live long enough to get a heart transplant. So when did we start first doing heart transplants here in Canada? Do any of you know when the first heart transplant was done in the world? South Africa, correct. So here in Canada, we did it a year later in 1968, and it was performed in Montreal. On average, across Canada, we probably implant about 163 hearts a year. However, because of the donor shortage, there's usually about 14 to 35 deaths on the waiting list every year. So as I mentioned, ventricular assist device, what we call our VADs, are mechanical heart pumps that are surgically implanted and that allow the blood to be circulated throughout the body when the heart is too weak to pump the blood on its own. So the number one reason we'll put in an LVAD is to bridge a patient to transplant. So we want to prolong that patient's life until a suitable donor heart becomes available. However, not everybody is a candidate for heart transplant. If you're over the age of 70, if you have liver problems, if you have lung problems, you're not going to be considered a heart transplant patient candidate. So we want to prolong these patients' lives, and we want to improve their quality of life. So we will put in these VADs to do that. So at the Toronto General, our transplant program first started in 1985. We do about 20 to 30 heart transplants a year. The last 2 years, we've had record number of transplants. We've done about 35 transplants the last 2 years. And our VAD program started back in 2001. One of our surgeons went to New York City and trained with Dr. Oz. Does everybody know that Dr. Oz is actually a cardiac surgeon? Yeah. So one of our surgeons trained with him, came back and started our LVAD program. About 1/3 of our heart transplant patients have been bridged with VADs. Now you think VADs are new technology, it's something that's just been invented, but actually they've been around for quite some time. In 1984, Stanford University was the first place to implant an LVAD. Here in Canada, the Ottawa Heart Institute was the first Canadian facility to implant an LVAD back in 1988. So it took us a few years at Toronto General because we only started in 2001. 10 years later, 2011, we celebrated our 100th LVAD implant. So we've come a long way. So this was the celebration when we celebrated 100 LVAD patients. So the gentleman on your right is Dr. Rao, and he is the surgeon that trained with Dr. Oz and then came back and started our LVAD program. And then some of you may recognize the lady in the middle, Dr. Ross. I believe she came and spoke to you about heart transplants at some point. And then the gentleman on the left and the young lady are both our previous LVAD patients who received heart transplants. So they wouldn't have survived to get their heart transplant if they didn't have an LVAD put in first. So when we began our program, we started with the pump on the right, the HeartMate 1. It's the first generation pump. It was a pulsatile pump. It actually pumped the blood. It was very large. It weighed about 1.2 kilograms, and you could actually hear it. So if one of you had this pump in you, we would all hear the pumping. Okay? Unfortunately, the bearings that push the blood in the pump would wear out after 2 years. So then the company made a second generation pump, the HeartMate 2. So as you can see, picture on the left, the HeartMate 2 is a much smaller pump. It's only 400 grams. And this is the pump that Jim has. So it's called continuous flow because there's a little rotor inside here that spins the blood continuously. Okay? So this pump is smaller. It's also very quiet. We don't hear Jim, do we? But if you put a stethoscope on his chest, you'd hear the hum of the pump. Now this pump can last about 7 to 10 years. There's a patient in California who just turned 90, and he's had his pump for 14 years. So you can see the size difference between these two pumps. Now we've had women my size have that first pump put in. Okay, so it's not incredible, but it can be done. So I actually have this pump. I'll pass it around. So this is Jim's pump. Okay, so as you can see in the picture, the surgeon implants it into the left ventricle of the patient. The blood comes into the pump. The little impeller rotates, sends the blood through this tube that goes to the aorta, which is the big blood vessel that sends the blood to the rest of the body. So the only thing you're going to see coming out, because this is all inside the body, is this power line, what we call the drive line. I'll let you guys pass this around. So that's the actual pump. Okay, so the pump is on the inside. The only thing you're going to see on the outside is the power line that goes into a little computer. This allows the pump to work, and during the daytime, the patient will be on batteries. So I actually have the computer and batteries. Here's the computer, and it attaches to 2 batteries. The computer weighs a pound, the batteries each weigh a pound. So this is what Jim and the other patients have to carry with them all the time. Now, if you ever wondered what Jim would look like without a shirt on, this is what it is we see. Okay? So the pump, would be here under the skin, and the only thing you see is this power line, the drive line that comes out of his skin. And we have a dressing over there to prevent any infections. So during the daytime, the patient walks around with the 2 batteries, either in a vest, as you can see on the right side, or in a bag. Now the batteries will last about 5 to 6 hours each, and together 10 to 12 hours. So during the daytime, after 10 to 12 hours, the patient just changes to new batteries. Now on the batteries, there's a battery gauge, so they can see how much battery power they have. And of course, they have to charge their batteries, so they go home with a charger. It takes about 4 hours to recharge a battery that's totally drained. Charger is color-coded, so yellow means it's charging, green means it's ready to go, red means stop, don't use it, it's a broken battery. We don't want patients to sleep on battery power at night because they can run out of battery power, right? So they actually have a wall unit to plug in. So they take the batteries off and they plug into a wall unit that gets power from the wall. So that computer that you see passed around will have sounds and lights if there's any alarm condition, and will let the patient know. We'll also tell the patient how much blood flow is going through their pump. And if there's a problem, the first line will tell the patient what to do. So in this picture, you can see it says call hospital contact. So that would be me. And then the second line tells the patient what the problem is. So they're saying there's something wrong with their computer called controller. Sorry, I'm not in the speaker. Okay. So along came another company that decided they wanted to make a pump as well. So in 2010, we started using this pump. Now it's considered a 3rd generation pump because there is a magnet that causes the impeller to spin. So potentially this pump will never wear out. And I actually have this pump. So you can see it's a much smaller pump. It only weighs about 160 grams. So it also has a computer, and it also requires 2 batteries, and they all weigh a pound each. So the patient still has to carry that around on the outside. So you can see this smaller pump fits right close to the heart, but it's the same idea. Blood flows out the left ventricle into the pump and then goes through that tube that is attached to the aorta. And then the only thing you see is that power line that comes through the skin that goes to the computer and the 2 batteries. So the patient can wear the batteries in a pack with the controller. And its controller also will tell the patient how much the pump is spinning, how many liters of blood are flowing through the pump. And if there's a problem, the first line will tell the patient what to do. So you can see low battery, and the second line will tell the patient what to do, replace battery. So those batteries last about 5 hours. It drains one battery and then moves on to the next battery. So in that device, the patient has to change batteries every 5 hours. And they also have a wall power unit to plug into the wall. They also have a charger to charge their batteries, and it also will be yellow to charge, green, it's fully charged. So that first company saw that they had made this new pump and decided they would make a new pump as well. Okay, so it looks very similar as to the one that you're just getting passed around. This one is a brand new pump. We were the first in Canada to use it. It's still in clinical trial, so we can't actually put it in unless we ask Health Canada for approval to get it into a patient. It uses the same batteries as the first HeartMate 2 that you saw, that Jim uses, the same batteries, the same battery charger, and it has the same computer. Now, we talked about how the pump will help blood flow go to the organs and make the patient feel stronger and feel better, but there are complications associated with LVAD. So it's not normal for blood to go from the heart into the pump and back to the body. We worry about blood clots. Okay, so if it's a big enough blood clot, it'll actually stop the pump from working. If it's a small blood clot, it'll actually go to the brain and cause a stroke. So all our patients have to be on blood thinners. I don't know if any of you are on the blood thinner Coumadin, warfarin, and they're also on aspirin because we really need to make sure that no blood clots form in the pump. So what happens when you're on blood thinners? You can potentially have bleeding problems, right? You can have a stomach ulcer that bleeds, you can have bruising, you can have nosebleeds. So those are some of the problems LVAD patients can have. And then we also worry about that line that comes through their skin. If they get an infection at that site, it'll spread to the pump that has their blood, and they'll become quite sick if they get an infection. So just to conclude everything, we are actually the second largest VAD program in Canada. There are only 11 VAD centers across all of Canada. Right now, we have 25 LVAD patients, Jim being one of them, that are at home with their LVADs. Initially, when we began our program in 2001, we weren't funded. So we relied on private donations to pay for our pumps. And these pumps are expensive. They're $100,000. Those batteries are $1,000 each. So it's very expensive. So the government only started funding our program back in 2013. So initially they only funded us for 20 LVADs a year, and gradually they've increased it. So now they'll pay for 45 LVADs a year. And next month we're celebrating our 200th LVAD patient. And that's the end of my talk. Any questions? Yes?
What does a patient do in what is a power failure?
So they go home with 6 batteries, and they all last about 6 hours. So they have about 2 days worth of battery power. But if it's going to be a prolonged outage, Any local hospital, police station, fire station, all have generators. So they just have to go over and ask if they can charge their batteries. Good question. And then anybody think about electricity and water? They don't go, right? So there's no swimming, there's no hot tubs, there's no baths with these devices. But the companies do make a special shower bag that's kind of a plastic bag that the batteries and the computer can go into so the patients can shower. Yes?
Does the machine make a noise when the power goes out, so that if you're sleeping?
Correct. So that controller would alarm if it's not receiving power. So if they're attached to wall power at night and the house power goes out, it will alarm to tell them to go to the batteries. Yeah. Yes?
How bad do you have to be to get one of these pumps?
How severe is your heart failure? So you grade heart failure stages. Stage 1 being, you're short of breath, you're tired, you can do 2 blocks. Stage 2, maybe you're down to 1 block before you get those symptoms. Stage 3, you're, doing minimal activity and you're getting short of breath. Stage 4, you're pretty much sitting in a chair all day and you're getting the shortness of breath, the swelling, and it's stage 4 patients that we consider severe. Yes?
Why would they, when you were talking about blood thinners, why would
Yes.
they utilize warfarin? Because warfarin requires monitoring,
Correct.
and that sort of complicates things, doesn't it? Why not use the other type of blood thinners?
Good point. Now, all the studies with LVAD patients have been on warfarin. We're all familiar with it. If there's any bleeding episode, we can reverse warfarin quickly. The new ones, we can't. So if there's significant bleeding, we can't stop the bleeding. So that's the reason why. Yes?
Is it fully funded when a patient receives this equipment?
Correct. Yes. So our program gets funding from the government and we pay for everything. So if the patient's battery stops working, they bring it back to me, I give them a new battery. It's fully funded. Yes?
The number 200 being all of the patients that are on this system now across Canada.
So it means that we implanted 200. Lots of them have gone on to have transplants. So that's why I only have 25 patients at the moment.
Do you have any idea what the potential would be if you had the money available and everything? How many in Canada would be eligible to be on this program?
Good question. I personally don't know the answer to that. But as Rob has mentioned, with an older aging population, more patients will be having heart failure. So we expect there'll be an increased need for LVADs. But not everybody wants to live on a mechanical heart pump. It's a choice, right? Some people don't want to be attached to batteries and feel restricted. It's a change of a lifestyle that Jim will have to let you know how it affects his lifestyle. Yes?
I had heart failure 7 years ago, and although I pant and lack stamina, I'm still alive and kicking.
Great.
Now, do I have to look forward to just a gradual deterioration until I have to be hooked up?
Well, I hope you're not looking forward to that.
A bad choice of words. Expect.
Yes. So now with the new medications, we can stabilize patients for longer periods of time. Everybody's progression of the disease process will look different. So, part is following your physician's instructions, following a low-salt diet, watching your fluid restrictions, doing exercise. That's all part of your regime, will help slow the progression of the disease.
Just another quickie.
Sure.
I already have implanted, what do you call it, IED.
Yes?
ICD?
CRT.
That's not what I have.
It's ICD plus.
Yes.
I think yours is CRT.
You think?
think
Oh,
so.
I thought, they keep calling it an ICD when I go to the place. However, what do they know? It's, oh, I mean, this is a slightly facetious question, but it's probably taking up a fair bit of space down there. It's not doing a damn thing, but that's good news. Where do you put all this hardware?
So your ICD is up higher in your chest, and the LVAD is below at the base of your heart.
Someone who is living with that device implanted, can they benefit from exercise?
Definitely. We send all our patients to cardiac rehab. It's an expectation of our program that if we put this LVAD in, that we want you to enjoy life, and part of that is getting stronger and going to cardiac rehab.
So the heart will respond then to the need to pump more quickly.
So your own heart still beats. This is just assisting giving more blood flow. Yes, so your own heart will respond.
My second question deals with hemoglobin. Is it common to see drops in hemoglobin in patients with those devices?
Interesting question. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes, correct. So as the pump spins, it may break a little bit of your red blood cells, so it may destroy a little bit of your red blood cells. So patients tend to have a little bit lower hemoglobins than normal other patients. Correct. Yes?
Since the device is there's a computer there, it's electronic,
Yes.
will it be affected by the electronics in the nearby environments?
So it can. We worry about that. So Jim has a spare controller in case it does malfunction. Okay, there's always any potential with any computer it can malfunction. So they carry spare batteries and a spare controller in case that should happen. It's pretty rare, especially with the new electronics around. But you can use your cell phone, you can use your microwave. We don't really like patients, they can travel, they can go on airplanes, but we prefer that they don't go through the security thing, that they get a pat down, just to protect the LVAD. There's no MRIs to be done with LVADs because it can stop the pump. CAT scans can be done, but not an MRI. So if transplants were easily available and there was no donor shortage, patients and surgeons would prefer one surgery only. Instead of an LVAD being one surgery and then waiting and getting a heart transplant is a second surgery. But it's not that way, so we bridge them to transplant with the VAD. And as I said, if you're blood group O, you can wait 1.5 years for a heart. Yes. So we do have some younger patients. Now, transplant itself is not a cure, it's a treatment. The average survival after transplant is about 12 years. There are some patients that can live up to 20 years with a transplant, but there's some that don't. So some of my younger patients believe that if they had the LVAD that was with them for 10 years, and then they get a transplant that lasts them for 15 years, that gives them 25 years. But there's always a potential with the LVAD of complications. And they can be a stroke, and then you become no longer an eligible candidate for transplant. So there's risks with everything. So that's a kind of a difficult question. We think of heart failure with ejection fraction less than 20%. Yeah.
So let me introduce Jim Hamilton, and Marnie will maybe come back for some more questions
Yes.
in a little bit.
Where am I?
So everybody, this is Jim. Jim Hamilton has been participating in the graduate program for a number of years. If anybody's not on email, this is the guy who calls, right? So Jim does, yes. We'll triple your salary after today, I promise. Yeah. 3 times 0 is... So Jim makes all our phone calls, and Jim's been here with me in rehab for 8 years now, I think. The first 4 was as a heart failure patient, and then the last 4.5 or so as a heart failure patient with a ventricular assist device. So we thought it might be interesting. People have been asking Jim, what's it like to live with a VAD? So Jim's going to share a little bit of his story, what it's like to live with a VAD, and then if you have any questions for Jim, he'll field those as well.
Or I'll just hand them off to you. Okay. Before I tell you what it's like to live with one, I have to tell you about before part. I mean, I had a silent heart attack, I guess, 97, and it kind of destroyed 30% of my left ventricle. So if you were to take an x-ray of my heart, it would look like a crescent roll. It was a big hole in here where it wasn't alive. And it was kind of rough because I couldn't do very much. I was still working at an ejection fraction of 20% or something like that. And I charged along and I started here and I was doing my stuff here. And I was doing everything that I normally did with a lot of difficulty. But things just kind of kept going downhill and downhill and downhill till eventually at one point I ended up with an ejection fraction of 9. Which is the part where you're talking about doing things. Well, breakfast was, I could make it downstairs and then I would wait. I would rest because I couldn't make breakfast. I'd already used up all of my energy to get downstairs. And then I could make breakfast, even if it was a bowl of cereal with putting the milk on it and getting the bowl out. That was enough to put me on the couch for another 20 minutes or half an hour. And then I could eat 3 spoonfuls, and then I'd rest, and then I'd rest, and I would spend about 18 hours a day sleeping or doing something like sitting and doing nothing very much. The 3 stairs, when you look at the back of here, that's like I have 3 stairs in the front of the house. I couldn't go up those at once. I had to stop at each step, and I'd have to wait because I couldn't make each step. I wasn't going anywhere very far, and I wasn't doing anything. A lot of my stuff that I wanted to do, I couldn't do anymore. I couldn't play music. I couldn't carry my guitar. I certainly couldn't carry any of my amplifiers or anything like that, but I couldn't even pick it up and hold it because it was too heavy. I just could not do anything because I had nothing going on. And I was in the heart transplant program and chugging along, trying to do everything that I can to get better, which meant being back here and working exercise, trying to get my body strong enough to handle the operation and strong enough to be able to live through the operation and live afterwards and try and get myself built up for it. And in one day, I just got the message, it's like you go in and for your doctor's appointments, you whip into the doctor's appointment and then there it is and you have these tests and this test takes 20 minutes and that takes and all of a sudden this test took 45 minutes and this one took 55 minutes. And then you go in and talk to the doctors and usually there's the doctor, their minion or assistant, and then you would have somebody else. And I walked in and there's like 7 of them there and I said, oh, look, it's the whole team's here. Something's wrong. And yeah, something's wrong. I had crashed and I wasn't going to live long enough to get a heart. So I was offered a choice, like you could either not have anything done and die in 2 or 3 months, or we can put this machine in you and see what happens. And I thought, Canadian Club Adventure, let's go for this. Let's try something else. Could be fun, And away we went. Dr. Rao did mine, and an absolute fabulous man. Actually, Toronto General, everybody, there's nobody there that I haven't met anybody at Toronto General that's just incredibly great people. And what they do is just amazing, and they care so much. Anyway, so I went in and I said, okay, we'll do this thing. And it was one of those things where it was like I go in and I remember showing up one night and they said, okay, get on the gurney and we're going to, we'll look at that. Okay, we'll give you something to rest. And I remember waking up 5 days later with a machine and people saying, oh, okay. And I said, and then that was like, and then from there it was a month till I could get out, which I thought, everybody else thought was pretty good for me, a whole month, and I thought, well, that wasn't bad. And then it took me 3 months to get, so I could even leave the house, because it really does, it kicks the crap out of you. It's a very tough operation to go through. But before, when I couldn't make up those 3 stairs, I came out in a month and I couldn't make it up the 3 stairs. And 3 months later, I said, why did I get this stupid operation? I can't do anything more than I could before. And then I woke up one day and I did things. It just kicked in. It was like all of a sudden I could do things. And so now that I've got the thing and I'm back here and I'm doing my exercising, I'm doing that stuff, I play music, I'm back, actually, I was in Barrie last night from like 4 o'clock till midnight playing music in a studio. And then came home and got up and took my car in for a couple of things to get done and a few other things, and I'm still going. So like I haven't, and it's just, I'm doing things, and I can do a lot more than I can. And I can do things like ride my motorcycle, and play my guitar and do other things, and I can go up and down the stairs, and it's not a problem, and I can, do stuff. I can pick up the kid, the grandkid, like these little guys. I met all 3 of those guys and I wouldn't have without this thing. Because, they all just came along. the oldest one is 4. And I would have missed all 3 of those guys without this thing. And the thing is, it's in here, and I'm not back to being like, an athlete. And the thing doesn't pump as much as a regular heart does. It flows. Vlad the Impaler in here does a good thing, but it doesn't pump as much as a human heart, but it does pump enough for me to do stuff I want to do. And I'm doing more stuff every day because I keep going at it. It's tough, the whole thing about, I used to swim. I don't swim anymore. I like to look at the water. I used to go play in the water, and there's no water anymore. I don't play with a canoe anymore. I don't do any of that stuff. But that's something I can deal with because I deal with other things. And somebody mentioned something about power failures. Well, I got mine when we had that storm, right?
Yep, the ice storm.
Okay, so the storm, my brother-in-law lent me a generator, this big, and it would power the battery charger or the thing for overnight, but wouldn't do both. It was this little thing like that. And that was it. It's like, that's all I had. And we had one light because the light worked and we could run me. I got switched over one morning and Ann was just dying for a coffee, so she went and plugged in the coffee pot into it. Oh, okay, well, that quit. Good thing I'm on batteries now. Yeah, that was all right. That worked out okay. No, it's not a big deal, it's the thing. So, but because of that, I bought an 8 kilowatt generator. It's just,
8,000.
yeah, it's as big as a pony, and it powers most of my house. So it all works out. So that's what I have in the house. But the power thing, and there are beeps and noise, and if your battery's slow, then it makes noise at you. Everything makes noise, which is somewhat difficult because I have 2 hearing aids and I'm pretty deaf because somebody was pretty bad as a kid, and when they played music on stage, they played really loud. My daughter came into me one day. I was sitting in the living room playing my bass, listening to headphones, my bass, and I had something else that was piped in, and I'm playing, and she comes in. What? You're beeping. Oh. And yeah, my batteries had gotten low and I couldn't hear them. So I told her and she yelled at me, and I never do anything unless it's with fresh batteries anymore. So there's stuff like that. But all of the other stuff, it's like seriously, like I get up in the morning, I make my own breakfast, I do that, I play with the kids, I do this, I go out, I do stuff. We just got finished redoing the laundry room because the shelves we need new shelves and cupboards and stuff like that. She did a lot, but I helped. I did some. Oh, I can see the face going back there. Oh, I'm sorry, she did it all and I watched. Is that better? But no, living with the thing, I mean, it's like, yeah, the whole thing about the shower thing and all of that, that was like, when I first got it in, there was no choice of a shower because I was still on the list for transplant. And so they didn't want to have anything get inside because you can't really close this thing off. So you put tape on it, and there's a tape on it, and you put everything else in a bag. And then as soon as you're finished your shower, you run out and you pull the tape off, and then you clean it with an antiseptic, and then you put another bandage on, and you get ready that way. But before, it was like they were worried that something might happen. But when they decided that, oh, you're healthy enough, we can do that, and you're back down to the right weight, we'll do that. They ran a bunch of tests again and discovered that I had developed a calcium deposit in my aorta, right where they cut, and said, well, we can't cut through calcium because it'll kill you, so you're doing okay the way you are, we're going to leave you. So now this is me forever. And I look at things and I think about it and say, well, it's okay. I mean, I get to do what I want. I don't get to do everything I want to do, and there's stuff that I find very difficult because it's harder to do because this doesn't give me as much as maybe it did before. Or the other thing is that because I went downhill so fast for so long, I don't have the strength left, and it's taking a long time to get that strength back. Of course, I've also done some dumb stuff in the middle that's caused me to do a couple of other things. So I mean, like I broke a leg, and that was like, well, that messes you up. You can't do anything because you can't exercise with a broken leg. So do things like that. But it setbacks and stuff. But it all works out. The other thing with it is it's rather, you get into this part where you start doing things and it's like, okay, we're going to do, everything has to be for me. It's like I'm doing the left battery first, then the right battery, and then we do that, we check this, check that, check the machine, and everything is all, I have to line it all up for me to make sure that I'm doing things in the right order and to make sure things are all right. And it's interesting to have no pulse because it is a turbine, and it's funny, and there's no pulse, and they have to use a machine to take my blood pressure because there's no pump. It doesn't go up and down. It's just one. So they squish it down, use an ultrasound thing, and then they can hear when it opens up, but that's it. So I suppose that would become kind of a rough thing if I was ever to fall down in the middle of the street somewhere, except my bag that has all of my spare parts on it, right inside the lid has a thing that says ICE, case of emergency, and it has all the things that you have to do to make sure that I'm okay. And the other parts about changing batteries and changing the machine, Marnie spent hours and hours and hours and hours every day for the month. Well, not the whole month because I wasn't really talkative for half of that month, I guess. But she taught me how to change that, and she taught my wife how to change it. And I got home and I taught the kids how to change it, and to make sure that, everything can be done that can be done. I can switch that around. But I wouldn't be here without this thing, and I'm quite happy that, it's here. I can do a lot more than what I could do. And thinking about it and thinking about, well, going through the whole thing of a transplant, I look at all of my people that I know that have gotten transplants and all of this stuff, because there's problems with this. Yeah, you have to worry about water and all of this other stuff and your power and everything else like that. But people who have transplants, they also have difficulties. They have rejection and they have other things that go on. And it's a trade-off. I mean, there's all of these things. You have this, but you might get this, so it's one of those. and I have this, but it might cause this, and it might do that, it might do that. And it's one of those things that, yeah, I can deal with it. I think most of us can, because, I mean, it comes down to the part where you either deal with it or you shut yourself off, you know? And just keep on going, because it's fun. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Jim?
Yes.
Does the weight of it, do you feel the weight?
Do I feel, yes, I do. I mean, there's like the 2 batteries that I carry around with me, plus the controller, all do weigh something. And yes, and they're a pain where I sit. Part of it is, there's always the weight on me. At night, go to bed, I take the batteries off and I hook up to a big long cord, which hooks into the wall unit. And so now I have just the wire, and the batteries can live on the floor beside me, and the other ones live in my other little box, because now my bedroom has got one machine that I plug into for night, the other machine that I put all the batteries in, and then I have a CPAP machine as well. So that's, I've got all of these things. And it's like, well, okay, let's do that. And so going to bed, it's like, okay, I get rid of the batteries, oh, I feel lighter already, you know? And then I can take this off, and then what I do is I usually put it beside me instead of having it around my waist. Is that okay? Okay, so I just put it beside me and I sleep. And because this little machine in there, it sits inside, when you lay down on your left side, the machine goes right into your ribs. So it's not very comfortable to lay on your left side for very long. So you can lay on your back, which is not a problem. You can lay on your right side, because there's a lot of give to the right side. I've never slept on my right side, and I've never slept on my back. I've always slept on my left side, you know? And so I've had 4 years of learning how to sleep on my right side and on my back. So there's that part. But it's kind of, you know, I don't have the weight on me now. So, you know, it's there, it's that. But,
Any other questions? Frank?
yes,
Jim,
yes.
you want to tell us what your blood pressure is,
74.
and it stays like
No.
that? No, why?
No, because if I don't drink enough water, it'll go down. If I drink too much water, it'll go up. If I exercise a bit, it'll go up, but then it comes down. If I do something like when we go up north, and sometimes we hit this place, because a lot of the 3 of us go up together and we stop, and sometimes we want Chinese food. Really? Could we have no, Chinese food. So I go in and I try and choose the least salty stuff that they have in the Chinese food place. And find that the least salty stuff in the place is probably somewhat the same thing as, I don't know if any of you guys ever lived on a farm, these big pink blocks that you put out in front of cows. Pure salt, right?
Salt blocks, I think they call them salt blocks.
And yeah, and it's like, so I know that sometimes I'll come in and we'll go to the Chinese food place, and they'll take my pressure, and my pressure will be 80, 82, and because when I look at it, I say, I'm not getting much of this stuff, so I try to avoid that. So depending on what I eat and what I drink and what I do, because if you don't do anything all day long, then that also changes it. Exercise is good for you, and it helps with that. But yes, my blood pressure does change, but I only have one number because I don't have anything that goes bump. It just goes. And yes, sir.
More questions?
How involved is the operation with they call it the installation? And then once that is successful, what happens then? Like, how soon do you get some sort of normal life? Like, is it a matter of days or months or hours? Or,
How long have I had this? I can't really tell you. I was asleep for that time.
Maybe, Marty, do you want to give like a standard ballpark answer
Yes.
for that?
So it's just like any other heart surgery. If you were to have a new valve or a bypass surgery, they're 4 hours long. Putting in this pump is the same, 4 hours long.
All right. Then how soon do you start feeling better?
Personally, I didn't feel better for 3 months. The first month, I mean, Dr. Rao, who's just an absolutely incredible guy, we have had long talks about him putting this thing in me, and I've talked to him about after I broke a collarbone, and I said, I would rather you put this vat in me 4 times than have a broken collarbone. The collarbone hurt that much. I mean, it was just incredibly painful for collarbone. And I said, and you putting that thing in me was the worst thing I've ever had. And he said, yes, it's like we kind of beat you up pretty severely. And because my strength wasn't very good at the time anyway, I mean, I was down to not doing very much. I mean, like it was, I mean, sleeping 18 hours a day, and I would get up, I would come downstairs in the morning, that would be it. I would not go touch another stair for the rest of the day. I would not do anything. And so I was pretty low to begin with. They put the machine in. I don't remember very much the first 5 days, because I guess I was pretty much a lot of keeping me quiet stuff. And then after that, it was trying to get going to do things. And it took me about 3 months before I actually started to feel good. And after the 3 months, it was still tiring and hard and stuff like that. But after 3 months, it felt like this is worthwhile, as opposed to, oh, this is stupid. I don't know. Why did I do this? I don't feel any better. But it did. But I mean, 3 months later, it was like I woke up one day and I feel better. I wasn't feeling better like I think I'll run out and do a marathon or anything like that. But I mean.
Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. We know an awful lot about VADS, which is excellent, cool technology. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes in the next 5 or 10 years. I know Jim and Marty will stick around for a little bit longer. If you have any questions, please feel free to speak with them. As always, out here in the hallway, we've got some snacks and refreshments, so if you want to grab something, please help yourself. Leslie is here with the parking. In December, our session is in the second Thursday of the month. The third Thursday is really close to the winter holidays, so it's been moved up. It's going to be a great session. Our program is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2018. Our speaker in December is a gentleman named Robin Campbell. He was the administrative director here at the program from 1968 when it started up until 1999. So he's going to come and share the history of the program, including some of the work we did training transplants to run the Boston Marathon with Dr. Yacoub, or Mr. Yacoub over in Harefield. So some very wonderful stuff. Folks, thank you very much. Thank you very much.